My coworker weaponized my medical history against me, so I weaponized her own words against her. I was sitting in the office break room when my friend made a joke about flying with my implants. Jill was at the table next to us, ears practically twitching with interest. By 5 p.m. that day, every single person in our 45-person office knew I'd had breast surgery. What Jill didn't know was the real reason behind those implants, and that ignorance was about to destroy her entire life. You know the type of coworker Jill was? The one who collected personal information like ammunition, always fishing for details she could weaponize later. She'd made herself bulletproof by befriending Debbie from HR and half the management team. Jill had this sick talent for making comments about people's appearances that cut deep but stayed just shy of actionable, always delivered with an innocent smile. She'd already targeted one colleague's weight and made anti-Semitic remarks about another's nose, but she was strategic, choosing elevators and bathrooms where cameras couldn't catch her. The harassment started immediately. Comments about me being more plastic than Barbie whenever I walked past her desk. Then, fake in 2 ways during meetings, complete with gestures toward my chest. A friend told me she'd called me a sack of silicone in the break room. By month 2, she was making assumptions about NHS funding, convinced I'd scam taxpayers. I approached her privately 4 times over 3 months asking her to stop. Each time she'd give me wide-eyed innocence, then escalate the next day. What Jill didn't know was that 4 years earlier, I'd watched my mom die from breast cancer. Both grandmothers died the same way. When I went for screening, specialists found potentially cancerous cells in my breast tissue like ticking time bombs. After watching 3 generations of women get destroyed by this disease, I chose bilateral mastectomy to eliminate the threat entirely. The surgery left me with 2 massive, jagged pink scars that sent me into severe depression. I threw out every mirror and got physically sick catching glimpses of my own reflection. I stopped leaving the house, stopped caring about anything. My therapist suggested a plastic surgeon who recommended implants specifically to hide those scars and save my mental health. That's the only reason I had them done. The breaking point came during lunch in the packed break room. I made an offhand comment about something being shallow when Jill's eyes lit up like Christmas. She gestured toward my chest and announced loud enough for everyone to hear, "Well, you'd certainly know all about being shallow, wouldn't you?" The entire room went silent. Something inside me snapped, and I looked her dead in the eye and told her exactly why I had those implants. The cancer cells, the mastectomy, the scars, the depression, every horrible detail while her face drained of color. I finished with, "So maybe next time you want to judge someone for cosmetic surgery, you should ask why they had it first. You absolute piece of shit." The aftermath was swift. A third of the office offered support, while the rest said Jill was joking, and I was oversensitive. Then came the email that made my blood run cold. Debbie wanted to see me about creating a hostile work environment. But here's the thing about being harassed for 3 months. You develop hyper-awareness of details. I found the section in my employment contract about requesting an impartial overseer if my reviewer had conflicts of interest. I photocopied that page and prepared for war. I messaged colleagues who'd offered support asking them to document Jill's harassment. 20 people agreed to provide written statements. I spent that evening documenting every interaction. The 4 times I'd asked her to stop, exact dates, and everyone who'd witnessed the lunchroom confrontation. Next morning, I collected signed letters from 16 colleagues detailing specific quotes, dates, and witnesses to Jill's harassment. Some included examples of her targeting other employees I hadn't known about. At 10 a.m., I walked into HR with my evidence folder. When Debbie tried to handle my case, I politely requested an impartial overseer due to her personal relationships. The supervisor got involved, and suddenly all 4 of us were reviewing my mountain of documented evidence. They grilled me for over an hour, but I had answers for everything. 16 signed witness statements, security camera footage of the lunchroom, detailed accounts of my attempts to resolve this privately. After they dismissed me, I watched the systematic destruction unfold. One by one, every witness got called for interviews until everyone had been questioned except Jill. At 4 p.m., she finally got called in and returned 30 minutes later, looking like she'd seen a ghost. At 5:15, Jill burst back into the office completely unhinged, shoving her belongings into a cardboard box while announcing that I'd gotten her fired through lies. As she stormed toward the elevator, my phone buzzed. I opened the email while watching her furious face disappear behind the closing doors. The subject line read, "Urgent, additional allegations," and the first line made my blood run cold. During Jill's final interview, she revealed information suggesting you may be in immediate danger from other parties. I scrolled down to read what Jill had actually told them in her desperation. According to the transcript, when they'd pressed her about how she knew so many intimate details about my medical history, she'd broken down and admitted that someone had been feeding her information about my surgery, my scars, even my therapy sessions. Someone with access to my private medical records had been coaching her on exactly which psychological pressure points would hurt me most. I stared at the screen in horror, realizing that Jill hadn't been my tormentor at all. She'd been someone else's weapon, and I'd just destroyed the only person who could tell me who was really trying to break me. The office felt different now, like walking through a minefield where every coworker might be the one who'd orchestrated my torment. I sat frozen at my desk, watching everyone go about their normal routines while my mind raced through possibilities. Who had access to my medical records? Who knew about my therapy sessions? The celebration happening around me felt surreal. People congratulating each other on Jill's removal while I realized the real threat was still here, probably watching me right now. Someone tapped my shoulder. I nearly jumped out of my skin before turning to see Sarah from accounting. She smiled sympathetically and asked if I wanted to join the impromptu happy hour everyone was organizing to celebrate the toxic atmosphere finally being addressed. I managed to shake my head, mumbling something about needing to finish a report. Sarah squeezed my shoulder before walking away, and I wondered if she was the one. Could she access medical insurance claims through her accounting role? 20 minutes later, I escaped to the bathroom, needing space to think. 2 voices drifted from the stalls. I recognized them as women from the marketing department discussing weekend plans. Then one of them mentioned my name, and I froze behind the door. They were talking about my medical history, but with details I'd never shared in that lunchroom confrontation. One of them mentioned my anxiety medication, saying saying, "Poor thing doesn't even know about the anxiety meds showing up in the insurance claims." My blood turned to ice. I'd never mentioned my anxiety medication to anyone at work. I waited until they left before emerging, my hands shaking as I washed them. In the mirror, my reflection looked haunted. I had to confront them, had to know how they knew. I caught up with them by the elevator, trying to keep my voice steady as I asked how they knew about my medication. They exchanged glances before one shrugged and said everyone knew. The office insurance coordinator had mentioned it during a benefits meeting, explaining how certain medications affected our group rates. When I insisted that information was private, they looked at me like I was being paranoid. "Beth handles all our insurance stuff," one said. "She probably just used it as an example." Beth, the insurance coordinator. Of course. She had access to every employee's medical claims, every prescription, every therapy session billed through our company insurance. I felt sick as pieces clicked into place. Beth had always been friendly with Jill, often eating lunch together. Had she been feeding Jill information about my medical history? The thought made my skin crawl. Back at my desk, I noticed Beth's office door was open. She was at her computer, fingers flying over the keyboard, looking perfectly normal. Just then, she glanced up and caught me staring. She smiled warmly and called out that she needed someone to cover her lunch break. Would I mind watching her desk for 30 minutes? My heart pounded. This was an opportunity to check her computer, to see if she'd been accessing my files. I nodded, trying to appear casual. But as I stood to head to her office, my desk phone rang. It was Tom from IT, panic in his voice. His daughter's daycare had called. She had a fever of 103 and needed immediate pickup, but his wife was in a client meeting 2 hours away. He needed someone to drive him since his car was in the shop. I looked between the phone and Beth's office. She'd specifically said 30 minutes. If I helped Tom, I'd miss my chance to search her computer. But Tom sounded desperate, and his daughter was only 3 years old. I made my choice. I grabbed my keys and told Tom I'd meet him in the lobby. As we rushed to my car, I saw Beth heading out for lunch, checking her watch. 30 minutes exactly, just like she'd said. During the drive, Tom couldn't stop thanking me, promising he owed me one. When we reached the daycare, his daughter was clearly miserable, crying for her daddy. While Tom comforted her, I offered to stop by the pharmacy for children's fever reducer. He looked so grateful I thought he might cry. The nearest pharmacy happened to be in the same plaza as Beth's gym. I recognized her car in the parking lot as we drove past. Inside the pharmacy, waiting for the prescription, my phone buzzed. A text from my therapist asking if I'd gotten a strange voicemail from someone claiming to be from my insurance company, asking to verify my appointment schedule. My therapist had found it suspicious and wanted to make sure I knew about it. My hands trembled as I typed back that I hadn't authorized any such call. Just then, the building's fire alarm started blaring. Everyone began filing out of the pharmacy, and I grabbed the medication before joining the crowd outside. In the parking lot, I found myself standing next to Beth, who must have evacuated from the gym. She was in workout clothes, looking concerned about the alarm. Then she turned to me with that same warm smile and mentioned casually that she'd seen my daughter at the coffee shop after school yesterday. "Emma looked stressed," she said. "I hope everything's okay at home." My blood froze. I hadn't told anyone at work my daughter's name. As the alarm continued blaring, Beth moved closer, speaking sympathetically about how hard it must be juggling work stress and parenting, especially with everything you're going through. Then she quoted something I'd said in therapy just last week, word for word. "Sometimes I feel like I'm drowning in responsibilities." She patted my arm, adding that therapy was so helpful for working through trauma, wasn't it? The alarm stopped, but I couldn't move. Beth knew about my therapy. She knew my daughter's name. She knew things that should have been completely private. As people began filing back into buildings, Beth suddenly clutched her chest, hyperventilating. She was having a panic attack. Without thinking, I moved to help her, guiding her to sit on the curb. She was crying now, gasping about how fire alarms triggered her ever since her own cancer scare. Through her tears, she pulled down the collar of her shirt slightly, revealing surgical scars that looked hauntingly familiar, mastectomy scars. She sobbed about how she understood what I'd been through, how she'd had her own preventive surgery 2 years ago after her mother died. I sat there, frozen between sympathy and suspicion, as she cried on my shoulder. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "That lady from your office offered to pick me up since you seem stressed lately. Should I let her?" My heart nearly stopped. I quickly texted back, "No," and that I'd explain later. When I looked up, Beth was watching me with red-rimmed eyes. "Teenage daughters," she said softly. "They worry so much about us, don't they?" Tom appeared with his daughter, looking frazzled but grateful. As I drove them home, my mind raced. Beth had my daughter's phone number. She knew our schedules. She'd been accessing my medical information and feeding it to Jill. But why? What did she want? Later that afternoon, I stopped by the coffee shop near the office. The barista, a college kid named Marcus who knew me as a regular, mentioned he'd seen something interesting. Jill and Beth met there every week, same table by the window. They'd sit for exactly an hour, Beth with a folder that looked like printed reports. Marcus said he could probably pull security footage if his manager approved, but she was on vacation for 2 weeks. I was asking Marcus for more details when the building manager walked in. He saw me leaning over the counter, intensely questioning the barista, and his expression darkened. I tried to explain I was just chatting, but he'd already pulled out his phone. 20 minutes later, I was in my boss's office, listening to concerns about my obsessive behavior and how I'd been harassing service workers, looking for information about former employees. The next morning, my surgeon's office called. They needed Beth's authorization for my follow-up mammogram records. The insurance company required her signature for any breast cancer-related claims. I felt trapped. I needed those records for my upcoming appointment, but now Beth would know exactly when I was going. She controlled access to my medical care. My sister called during lunch, her voice careful. She'd heard about the drama at my office and wanted to check in. Then she said something that made my stomach drop. "This reminds me of when Dad died. Remember how you got paranoid about the funeral director? You were convinced he was gossiping about the family." I didn't remember it that way at all, but suddenly I questioned my own perceptions. Was I being paranoid again? The office Slack channels became a minefield. Every message I sent about needing time off for medical appointments got screenshot by Beth and forwarded to management as evidence of my excessive absences. When I tried to document her access to my files, the compliance officer flagged my inquiry as a potential HIPAA violation. Apparently, trying to investigate who'd accessed your own medical records could be seen as attempting to breach others' privacy. Then Thursday happened. I went to pick up my antidepressant refill, only to have the pharmacy tell me my insurance had been terminated. A call to our benefits hotline revealed Beth had accidentally removed me during a routine update. It would take 5 to 7 business days to restore coverage. Without insurance, my medication would cost $400, money I didn't have after paying for therapy sessions. The exhaustion hit me hard. Running on no sleep and rationing my remaining medication, I made a critical error with the Johnson account files. I misfiled important documents in the wrong client folder, causing a minor panic when they couldn't be found for a deadline. My manager pulled me aside, concerned. He said I seemed intoxicated. My eyes were glassy, my hands shaking. I tried to explain about the insurance mix-up affecting my medication, but it sounded like an excuse. Sarah found me crying in the bathroom afterward. I told her everything. Beth's access to my medical files, the insurance accident, the way she knew about my daughter. Sarah bit her lip, looking uncomfortable. She'd applied for a promotion in Beth's department. She believed me, she said, but she needed this job. Her son's autism therapy was expensive, and the promotion came with better insurance coverage. She couldn't be seen taking sides. The break room emptied whenever I entered now. Coworkers scattered like I had something contagious. I found out why when I accidentally saw an email on someone's screen, a mental health first aid training invitation that mentioned being aware of colleagues showing signs of paranoia or persecution complexes. My name was listed as an example of someone who might need support. I started documenting everything obsessively. That's when I found it. A timestamp showing Beth had accessed my medical files at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, well outside business hours. She'd lied when she claimed she'd just learned about my surgery. The access logs showed she'd been viewing my records for months before Jill started her harassment campaign. My work friend admitted what I'd suspected. She needed Beth's help getting her son's therapy covered by insurance. Beth had the power to approve or deny coverage exceptions. No one could afford to cross her. When I tried to get Marcus the barista to provide a written statement about Beth and Jill's meetings, he got nervous. His manager had returned and warned him about getting involved in customer disputes. When I pressed, he admitted I'd made him uncomfortable with my intensity. He'd reported feeling harassed. In desperation, I filed a formal complaint with HR. The moment of relief I felt was caught on the office security camera, me smiling as I submitted the forms. That image would later be used as evidence of my vindictive behavior, proof that I was enjoying causing problems for others. Friday afternoon, Beth and I passed in the hallway. We both stopped, sizing each other up like fighters before a match. In that moment, we both understood the truth. Only one of us could remain at this company. Whoever stayed would control the narrative. Whoever left would be forever branded as the problem. The weekend offered no relief. I spent it poring over employee handbooks and insurance policies, looking for any leverage. My daughter Emma kept asking why I was so stressed, mentioning that Aunt Beth had told her I'd been really sick back then. When had Beth become Aunt Beth to my daughter? The thought of her talking to Emma about my medical history made me physically ill. Monday morning brought a new horror. I discovered an email I'd sent Beth 2 years ago, thanking her for being so understanding about my situation when I'd first returned from surgery. The vague wording now looked like an admission of mental instability. Had I thanked her for keeping my medical information private, or had she twisted my gratitude into something else? During my lunch break, I noticed Beth's calendar printout in the break room trash. The blocked out time slots matched my therapy appointments exactly. She'd been tracking my schedule, knowing when I'd be vulnerable, when I'd be processing trauma with my therapist. The violation felt so complete I could barely breathe. HR's response to my complaint was swift and brutal. They treated it as retaliation for Jill's termination. After all, Jill had named Beth as a source, and now I was targeting Beth. It looked like I was systematically attacking anyone connected to my harasser. The fact that Beth had accessed my files during non-work hours was explained away. She often worked late to catch up on insurance authorizations. I filed an official records request through legal channels. The audit trail revealed multiple late-night logins where Beth had accessed not just my files, but specifically my mental health claims. Each access corresponded with Jill's escalating harassment. Beth had been feeding her information strategically, choosing exactly what would hurt most. Social media provided another clue. Beth's public Facebook showed photos from a medical coding conference, with Jill sitting right beside her at the hotel bar. They'd known each other before Jill even started at our company. This wasn't a casual friendship. It was a pre-existing relationship I'd never known about. The support group schedule at the cancer center was public information. I discovered Beth attended the same BRS cancer support group as me, just on different days. Had she been gathering information about me there too? The thought of her sitting in the same room where I'd cried about my mother made me sick. I tried to record our next interaction, but my phone died at the crucial moment. Beth saw me fumbling with it and smirked, knowing exactly what I'd been trying to do. Without evidence, I looked increasingly unstable to everyone watching. Tuesday brought an impossible choice. Emma had a therapy appointment at the same time as my crucial HR meeting. If I missed the meeting, my complaint would be dismissed. If I missed Emma's appointment, I'd be marked as an uninvolved parent by her counselor, ammunition Beth could use to paint me as an unfit mother too stressed to care for her child. I chose the meeting. As I sat defending myself to skeptical HR representatives, I knew Emma was sitting in a waiting room alone, telling her therapist that mom was too busy fighting with coworkers to show up. The guilt ate at me, but I had to see this through. The breaking point came when the coworker who'd seen Beth with my files got promoted to Beth's team. He pulled me aside, apologetic but firm. He couldn't testify against his new boss. His wife was pregnant with twins. He needed the stability. Another ally lost to Beth's strategic positioning. That evening, I discovered the final violation. Beth had switched to the same oncologist my mother had used at the same treatment center. She was sitting in the same chemotherapy chair where my mother had spent her final treatments. When I confronted her, she smiled sadly and offered to help process our grief together if I just dropped the complaint. I refused. Her response was swift. She filed a report stating I was refusing mental health support from a fellow survivor, painting me as someone too damaged to accept help. The narrative was complete. I was a paranoid, vindictive employee attacking anyone anyone who tried to support me. By Thursday, both of us looked haggard. The stress was breaking us both down, but neither would yield. We passed in the halls like ghosts, each documenting the other's every move. The entire office walked on eggshells, forced to choose sides in a war they didn't understand. Friday's mail brought the final piece of the puzzle. My mother's oncologist had sent records I'd requested months ago, delayed by administrative backlog. Attached was a note. Your mother mentioned concerns about insurance office staff, but patient confidentiality prevents me from sharing specifics. My mother had known. She'd seen what Beth was doing, but kept quiet to protect my job. I sat at my desk, staring at that note, as coworkers filed past for happy hour. Someone asked if I wanted to join them, to celebrate the end of a difficult week. I looked up at their concerned face and realized I didn't even know who to trust anymore. Beth had turned my workplace into a battlefield where every interaction could be a trap. The computer screen in front of me showed 23 unread emails, probably more documentation requests, more meetings, more accusations. My phone buzzed with another text from Emma asking when I'd be home. In Beth's office, I could see her typing rapidly, probably documenting my erratic behavior of sitting frozen at my desk. I knew this was just the beginning. Beth and I were locked in a war that would escalate until one of us was destroyed. But sitting there, surrounded by people who might be enemies or allies, I made a decision. I would not let her win. I would not let another woman use my mother's disease as a weapon against me. The battle was just beginning, and I was ready to fight. The following week, Beth's ex-husband's brother showed up at my sister's birthday dinner. He sat next to me, making small talk about work stress while Beth watched from across the table. My sister had invited him without knowing the connection. When he mentioned Beth had been helping him through a difficult time, my stomach churned. She'd infiltrated my family gatherings now. During dessert, he casually mentioned how Beth had shared my mother's favorite recipe with him, one she'd apparently gotten from the Cancer Center's cookbook fundraiser, the same fundraiser where my mother had submitted her final recipe before dying. Beth caught my eye and smiled sweetly, knowing she'd found another pressure point. Monday's performance review meeting included both my manager and Beth, who'd been asked to provide input on my workplace wellness. They presented conflicting accounts of our previous conversations about medical privacy. Beth produced documentation showing I'd thanked her for her discretion, while I insisted she'd been violating my privacy. Without recordings, it became my word against hers. That evening, I searched through old emails desperately. I found the message I'd sent Beth 2 years ago. A brief thank you for being so understanding about my situation after returning from surgery. The vague wording could mean anything. Had I been thanking her for keeping quiet or for approving my medical leave? The ambiguity now worked against me. Emma came home upset that night. She mentioned Aunt Beth had told her about the time I was really sick and how the scars had changed me. Beth had been poisoning my daughter's perception of me, making her question whether her mother was stable. Emma asked if the scars were why I'd been acting strange lately. My own daughter was starting to doubt me. I discovered Beth's calendar printout in the break room trash can. The blocked time slots aligned perfectly with my therapy appointments. She'd been tracking when I'd be most vulnerable, when I'd be processing trauma. The realization that she'd been monitoring my mental health treatment schedule made me physically ill. HR's investigation into my complaint treated it as retaliation. Since Jill had named Beth as her information source, my complaint looked like systematic targeting of anyone connected to my harasser. They dismissed Beth's late-night file access as dedication to her job. She often worked overtime on insurance authorizations. My official records request through legal channels revealed the full scope. Beth had accessed my files repeatedly during non-work hours, specifically reviewing mental health claims. Each access date corresponded with Jill's harassment escalating. The pattern was clear. Beth had been strategically feeding Jill information designed to hurt me most. Beth's Facebook page revealed photos from a medical coding conference. Jill sat beside her at the hotel bar, drinks in hand. They'd known each other before Jill joined our company. This wasn't a casual workplace friendship, but a pre-existing relationship I'd never suspected. The Cancer Center's public support group schedule showed Beth attended the same breast cancer support group, just on different days. The thought of her sitting in the same room where I'd sobbed about my mother, possibly gathering information about my vulnerabilities, made my skin crawl. I attempted to record our next interaction, but my phone battery died at the crucial moment. Beth noticed me fumbling with the dead device and smirked. Without evidence, I looked increasingly paranoid to anyone watching our exchange. Emma's therapy appointment conflicted with my crucial HR meeting. Missing the meeting meant my complaint would be dismissed. Missing Emma's appointment meant being marked as an uninvolved parent. Ammunition Beth could use. I chose the meeting, knowing Emma would tell her therapist about my absence. The coworker who'd witnessed Beth accessing my files got promoted to her team. He apologized but explained he couldn't testify against his new supervisor. His wife was pregnant with twins, and he needed job stability. Another ally lost to Beth's strategic positioning. Beth had switched to my mother's oncologist at the same treatment center. She was receiving care in the same chemotherapy chair where my mother spent her final treatments. When I confronted her, she offered to help me process our shared grief if I'd drop my complaint. Her formal report painted me as refusing mental health support from a fellow survivor. The narrative was complete. I appeared as a paranoid, vindictive employee attacking anyone who tried to help me. Both of us looked exhausted, but neither would back down. My mother's oncologist finally sent records I'd requested months ago. His note mentioned my mother had expressed concerns about insurance office staff, but patient confidentiality prevented him from sharing details. My mother had known about Beth but stayed silent to protect my job. The revelation hit me hard. I dug through my mother's things that weekend, finding her patient portal login information. Her messages to the oncologist confirmed my worst fears. She'd noticed someone accessing her records inappropriately, but didn't want to cause problems at my workplace while fighting cancer. I discovered Beth's pattern went deeper. Her file access had started after Jill casually mentioned planning to target me. Initially, Beth had flagged concerning behavior to management. Her early emails showed attempts to protect me from Jill's harassment. Something had changed her from protector to predator. My sister faced an impossible choice. Her daughter's upcoming surgery required insurance approval, and Beth had fast-tracked the authorization, believing me meant risking her child's health care. She chose her daughter, but secretly shared information about a complaint Beth had filed at her previous job. I began using Beth's own tactics. I started conversations with her elderly mother during chemotherapy treatments. While discussing my own mother's death, I learned about Beth's past. Her mother mentioned Beth had started attending the hospital support group 2 years ago, right after a workplace incident. Jill's husband appeared at my desk, demanding answers. He revealed Beth had convinced Jill that I was dangerous, that I'd targeted other employees before. Beth had manipulated Jill into believing she was protecting the office from an unstable person. The puppet master had convinced her puppet she was a hero. Fighting both Beth's current actions and investigating Jill's claims meant missing Emma's school conference. The counselor marked me as an uninvolved parent. My credit cards maxed out from therapy and medical bills, while Beth received a promotion for her excellent handling of sensitive situations. A confrontation erupted in the cancer center waiting room. Other patients watched in horror as we argued about privacy and grief. Beth painted me as someone who couldn't accept help from a fellow survivor. I looked unhinged while she appeared compassionate and misunderstood. The company announced restructuring that moved my position under Beth's department. The decision had been made during my mandated mental health leave. I lost my promotion to someone who could maintain professional relationships. Beth was appointed as my direct supervisor. Working from home became my only option while Beth occupied my former office. She sent daily emails about my performance issues and concerning behavior patterns, each message copied to HR, building her case against me. Emma begged me to stop making everything about cancer, saying I was scaring her like when Grandma died. My investigation into Beth's file access triggered an audit of the IT department. An innocent worker faced investigation for enabling unauthorized access. His security clearance was suspended, affecting his mortgage approval. His pregnant wife sobbed in the parking lot while I watched, knowing I'd caused their pain. I had to continue despite destroying others' livelihoods. My therapist asked if Beth might be trying to help in her broken way. The possibility that Beth genuinely believed she was protecting the company from another unstable cancer survivor made me question everything. I publicly admitted to accessing files without proper authorization, trying to maintain credibility. The admission backfired when HR used it as evidence of my own privacy violations. Evidence revealed I'd missed my mother's portal messages about Beth because I'd been avoiding anything cancer-related. Beth's motivations became clearer through her mother's rambling during treatment. Her sister had experienced a breakdown after cancer surgery, becoming paranoid and vindictive at work. Beth saw patterns in me that triggered her protective instincts. She genuinely believed she was preventing another tragedy. I violated my mother's memory by sharing her private medical photos to prove Beth's inappropriate access. The professional version of myself died as I became a vigilante survivor. Beth's mother, having a lucid moment, mentioned Beth constantly brought work files home, giving me a new angle to investigate. Small victories felt hollow. Proving Beth's file access meant nothing when I saw her sobbing at her mother's bedside. We were both daughters watching our mothers die, both terrified of the disease that stalked our families. Her formal complaint gained traction, painting me as dangerous to workplace safety. Everything depended on the IT forensics expert's testimony. He'd found evidence of Beth's access patterns, but faced pressure about his own audit results. His willingness to testify wavered as his family's stability hung in the balance. My past kindness to Beth's mother became unexpected leverage. The confused woman asked why her daughter cried whenever my name was mentioned. She'd noticed Beth's obsession with protecting the office from another situation like Claire. Claire was Beth's sister, whose post-cancer breakdown had destroyed her career. The department split between those who'd benefited from Beth's insurance help and those who saw the truth. Legal determined the HIPAA violation was unclear since Beth had legitimate business purposes for accessing files. Internal access wasn't criminal without proving malicious intent. I called in a favor from my mother's oncologist. He owed a moral debt. My mother had saved his research by participating in trials while dying. He agreed to review the records but couldn't testify due to a pending malpractice suit. He couldn't risk his license, even for my mother's memory. His pattern analysis revealed what I'd suspected. My mother had known Beth was accessing her records but stayed silent to protect my job. She'd spent her final weeks gathering evidence while pretending ignorance. The oncologist confirmed she'd expressed concerns but couldn't share specifics due to confidentiality. Her journal revealed the truth. My mother had spent her last weeks afraid but determined. She'd documented Beth's behavior, knowing I'd need evidence someday. She chose investigating over a peaceful death, dying while fighting for me. I committed to seeing her plan through despite the career cost. Beth's sworn statement about never accessing records maliciously contradicted the metadata. She'd accessed files the night before each major harassment incident. The pattern was undeniable, but proving intent remained elusive. I presented evidence to the board without emotion. While Beth realized my mother's journal existed, legal momentum shifted as documentation showed Beth had shared my information with Jill before harassment began. Both sides prepared for final arbitration. The stakes had never been higher. Whoever lost would lose everything. The arbitration hearing was scheduled for the following Tuesday. I spent the weekend reviewing every document, every timestamp, every piece of evidence my mother had gathered. The journal entries showed she'd been tracking Beth's behavior for months before her death, noting each time Beth mentioned my medical information to others at the cancer center. Monday morning, I arrived early to find Beth already at her desk, surrounded by her own stack of documents. We made eye contact through her office window, both understanding this was the endgame. The IT forensics expert had agreed to testify after I showed him how Beth's actions had affected multiple employees, not just me. The conference room filled with department heads, HR representatives, and legal counsel. Beth and I sat on opposite sides of the long table, our evidence folders between us like battle lines. The arbitrator, a stern woman from corporate, began by reviewing the timeline of events. I presented my mother's journal first, watching Beth's face pale as I read entries documenting her questions about my surgery at the cancer center. The IT expert testified next, confirming Beth had accessed my medical files 47 times since my initial diagnosis. Each access corresponded with information Jill had used in her harassment. Beth's defense crumbled when the arbitrator asked about her relationship with Jill. She admitted they'd met at at the medical coding conference but insisted she'd only been trying to help. Her voice cracked as she explained about Claire, her sister who'd had a breakdown after cancer surgery and destroyed her career with paranoid accusations. The pattern emerged clearly. Beth had accessed files for 4 other cancer survivors in our company over the past 3 years. 2 had quietly resigned, 1 had transferred departments, and 1 had taken early retirement. I was the first to fight back. The arbitrator ordered a full audit of Beth's access history. During the lunch break, I found Beth crying in the bathroom. She looked broken, clutching her phone with a photo of her sister on the screen. She explained how Claire had accused everyone of conspiring against her after her mastectomy, how the paranoia had cost her everything. Beth had seen the same patterns in me and panicked. The afternoon session revealed more violations. Beth had shared information from my therapy claims with other employees, warning them about my instability. She'd accessed my daughter's information through dependent coverage records. The arbitrator's expression grew increasingly grim with each revelation. Beth's breakdown came when confronted with evidence she'd coached Jill on specific phrases to use. She sobbed about protecting the workplace, about preventing another situation like Claire's. She genuinely believed she was saving the company from another unstable cancer survivor. The fear in her eyes was real. The arbitrator called a recess to deliberate. I sat in the hallway, exhausted but oddly sympathetic. Beth wasn't evil. She was terrified, traumatized by her sister's breakdown and her mother's ongoing battle with cancer. She'd projected her fears onto every cancer survivor who crossed her path. When we reconvened, the arbitrator's decision was swift. Beth's actions constituted gross violations of privacy policies and HIPAA regulations. Her termination was effective immediately, with a recommendation for criminal investigation. She'd be banned from working in any capacity involving medical information access. But the arbitrator turned to me next. My own actions, accessing files without authorization, involving innocent employees in my investigation, had also violated company policies. I faced a formal reprimand and mandatory counseling, but would keep my job with new oversight measures in place. Beth packed her office while security watched. I helped carry a box to her car, both of us too drained for anger. She mentioned her mother's chemo appointment the next day, how she didn't know how she'd pay for it without insurance. I gave her the oncologist's direct number, the one who'd helped my mother. Professional courtesy might get her a payment plan. The office felt different after Beth left. Colleagues who'd avoided me started making eye contact again. Sarah apologized for not supporting me, explaining her son's therapy had been approved just before everything exploded. The promotion she'd wanted went to someone else entirely. Beth's entire department was being restructured. Emma noticed the change immediately. I seemed calmer, less paranoid about every interaction. We talked about boundaries and privacy, about how fear can make people do terrible things. She deleted Beth's number from her phone without my asking, understanding finally why I'd been so stressed. The company implemented new privacy protocols I helped design. Medical information access now required 2-person authorization with documented business need. The insurance coordinator role was split between 3 people with checks and balances. My experience became a cautionary tale in training materials. Tom from IT sent a thank you note. His daughter had recovered fully, and he'd never forgotten my help that day. His testimony had been crucial in establishing Beth's pattern of late-night access. His wife had their twins, 2 healthy boys who'd never know how their father's courage helped expose years of privacy violations. I returned to therapy with a new perspective. The trauma of being targeted was real, but so was the trauma Beth carried from her sister's breakdown. My therapist helped me process the complex emotions of being both victim and witness to another woman's fear-driven destruction. 3 months later, I received a letter from Beth. She was in therapy too, working through her need to control cancer survivors' narratives. She'd moved in with her mother to help with treatment costs. She apologized without asking for forgiveness, acknowledging the harm she'd caused while trying to prevent imagined disasters. The Cancer Center support group welcomed me back carefully. Word had spread about the confrontation with Beth, making some members uncomfortable. I attended quietly, sharing less than before but finding comfort in the familiar faces. Beth's empty chair across the circle served as a constant reminder. My annual mammogram appointment arrived with less anxiety than expected. The new insurance coordinator handled the authorization professionally, no questions asked. The results came back clear. No signs of recurring cellular abnormalities. I celebrated quietly, sharing the news only with Emma and my sister. Work settled into a new rhythm. I'd gained respect for standing up to harassment, but also wariness for how far I'd gone pursuing justice. Younger employees sometimes asked for advice about workplace conflicts. I always emphasized documentation and proper channels, warning against the vigilante path I'd taken. The Jill situation resolved through lawyers. Her husband dropped his threats after learning how Beth had manipulated his wife. Jill herself sent a brief apology through her attorney, acknowledging she'd been wrong to target me, but maintaining Beth had convinced her she was protecting others. My mother's journal went back in the closet, its purpose served. She'd spent her final weeks fighting for me instead of finding peace, and that knowledge would always sting. But her evidence had exposed years of privacy violations, protecting future cancer survivors from Beth's misguided protection. I kept my job but never forgot the cost. The trust I'd once had in workplace relationships was forever altered. Every insurance form, every medical leave request, every casual question about my health carried new weight. Privacy had become my obsession, born from violation and sustained by vigilance. Emma grew more independent, having seen her mother fight and win at great personal cost. She understood now why I'd been so protective of personal information, why seemingly innocent questions could hide darker motives. The experience aged us both, but also strengthened our bond. The office Christmas party felt different that year. I attended briefly, accepting congratulations for the new privacy protocols while avoiding deeper conversations. Someone mentioned Beth had found work at a retail store, far from any medical information. The relief in the room was palpable. My story spread through professional networks as a warning about medical privacy in workplace settings. HR departments across the city reviewed their policies. Insurance coordinators faced new scrutiny. Change happened slowly, but it happened. Beth's 47 unauthorized accesses had finally meant something. I never saw Beth again, but I thought of her often. Two women driven by cancer's shadow to extremes, one violating privacy to prevent imagined catastrophes, the other sacrificing everything to expose those violations. Neither of us emerged unscathed. Both of us were forever changed by our mother's diseases and our own survival. The scars remained, both physical and emotional. My implants still drew occasional comments from new employees who didn't know the history, but now I had boundaries, protocols, and the hard-won knowledge that my medical history belonged to me alone. The price of that knowledge had been almost too high to pay. Work continued. Life continued. The hypervigilance faded slowly, but never disappeared entirely. I'd learned that survival meant more than just beating cancer. It meant protecting yourself from those who'd use your survival against you, even those who believed they were helping. That lesson, carved through months of investigation and conflict, would stay with me forever.